What's up everybody? I'm super excited to bring you this video where we review another military branch, and this is highly requested on the channel, the Space Force. And no, I know what you're thinking. We're not here to talk trash and make fun of it. I feel like the Space Force has just had a bad rap, especially because it's usually compared to the civilian counterpart, which is NASA. Let's get into this video, see what the Space Force is, what they do, and how they stand up and compare to the rest of the military branches. By the end of this video, let's see if your mind changed on the Space Force. Let's go.
This is the inside of a radome, playfully called golf balls by Space Force Guardians.
Guardians?
These radomes house satellite dishes that help Guardians detect incoming missiles sent by foreign adversaries. A crucial piece of equipment that has saved hundreds of American lives.
It was the largest ever ballistic missile attack on Americans.
On January 8, 2020, Iran fired missiles at the Al-Assad air base in Iraq, where 2,000 American troops were stationed.
Our troops right here at Buckley were able to detect the missiles and then report the specific areas at risk at Al-Assad and afford the troops on the ground the opportunity to escape and get out of the way. And as a result, nobody died.
Since its inception in 20...
I don't know if I was really feeling the name Guardian at first, but after seeing what they do initially, that's kind of badass. We had something in Afghanistan called a G-Boss, and it's an eye in the sky that detects muzzle flashes and IDF or indirect fire to kind of give us a general location of where it's coming from, but it definitely wasn't capable of anything on this scale. Off to a good start. Let's go, Space Force.
19. The United States Space Force has quickly become a crucial component of the U.S. military. But many Americans still don't understand what exactly this branch does.
I like the idea of a Space Force. I mean, I don't know if we need it, and I'm sure there are better ways we could spend our money, but it sounds awesome. It really does.
In reality, Space Force Guardians work from bases on the ground to help protect assets up in space.
There's a possible event in Sector 52.
Insider was granted access to Buckley Space Force Base in Aurora, Colorado, to see how Guardians detect incoming missiles and to learn more about the newest branch in the U.S. military.
Originally, my plan was to go Air Force, but when I gave my job list to my recruiter, he's like, hey, all these jobs are either being transferred or are currently in the Space Force. Would you like to essentially switch from Air Force to Space Force? I immediately was like, yep, switch me.
All enlisted Space Force Junior Guardians start their career at Lackland.
I hope that's old footage, because there's no way that they gave them the M16A2 service rifles that we used back in the Marine Corps in 2007, and then we eventually switched off to the M4s. So you're telling me right now, Space Force, that you guys have the capability to detect missiles thousands of miles away, figure out the trajectory of those missiles, call ahead to the troops on ground, determine the possible impact site to alert them before it even occurs, but then you're gonna give them some M16A2 rifles, bro? I don't like that. Y'all can do better than that. Just saying. I'm just a firearms guy. Sorry, let's just go ahead. Ignore that.
And Air Force Base. That's because the Space Force recently split off from the Air Force, creating the 6th official U.S. military branch.
So we transitioned from the Air Force to a Space Force to put that level of focus from a programmatic, resourcing, and manpower perspective, because at the end of the day, when it comes to the protection of the space domain, that focus is imperative.
After basic military training, Junior Guardians begin their specialized classroom training in a program called STARCOM.
Once I was done with basic, they immediately sent me over to Vandenberg. From there, we learned everything fundamental we needed to learn, from space training, from satellites to telescopes to simple stars.
Guardians move on to more hands-on training when they arrive at their assigned Mission Delta.
A Space Delta is a Space Force organization that is assigned a particular mission area.
Within the Space Force, the Operations Wing, or Space Operations Command, has 9 mission deltas, each with a different focus. For example, Space Delta 6, known as Cyber Delta, focuses on cybersecurity.
From GPS to making payments on your credit cards, to making phone calls, to communicating with anybody in the world, all of that comes down to what we have available in space. And if that's those space assets are contested by adversaries or whatnot, we lose that ability to function at our peak performance.
Okay.
The largest delta, Space Delta 4, is headquartered here at Buckley Space Force Base.
So Space Delta 4's mission, per se, is to be able to protect, to guard against missiles, missile attacks launched against the United States, our allies, as well as deployed troops worldwide.
At Buckley, Junior Guardians do on-the-job training for 3 months in a mission management course.
And we'll just drill them with different experiences, different lessons, and we'll have them conduct operations on the simulator.
The simulator at Buckley uses real-life scenarios to train Guardians. Due to the sensitive nature of the mission, we were not permitted to film the screens, which could reveal top-secret areas of interest. But we were allowed to document a training session
This will be
from an
interesting.
approved vantage point.
There is a possible vent in Sector 52.
We are being trained to be the first line of defense. We are learning how to correctly and accurately collect and identify the systems any of our adversaries could be throwing at us.
To detect incoming missiles, Delta 4 uses a space-based infrared system, or SIBRs, 11 satellites in space that orbit around either the equator or poles and scan Earth's surface for heat anomalies. That infrared data is sent down from the satellites to these giant radomes, which house satellite dishes that are strategically pointed at areas of interest around the world.
Infrared data is presented in a way on our display panels, if you will.
Missile launch confirmed. Impact area located in Sector 42.
Junior Guardians call authorities to inform them of possible events, so they can alert the targeted areas.
52. How copy? This is Vortex out.
There's a lot of pressure, but
All right,
they also teach us how to do it.
Okay. I get that they're filming here, and you could tell that they kind of staged this scenario because that communication was a little bit wonky. So for an example, she called them and said, "Hey you, this is me. How do you read?" and then hung up the phone on them. That's like me calling you right now and being like, "Hey, this is Jay downrange. Do you hear me?" And then hanging up the phone on them before they have a chance to say anything. Okay, let me just stop. That's the air traffic controlling me. Let me just go ahead and keep this thing going. But that's a little bit weird. Just saying, let's go.
Correctly and as calmly as possible.
Make sure we speak up a little bit, but great job getting confirmation of the missile launch. And finally, outstanding getting the information out to our allies and partners, making sure that they were all on the same page with us.
Damn, that dude's so nice and calm spoken.
After Junior Guardians have finished their mission management training, they can begin their job on the operations floor. Due to the operations floor's 24/7 active role in missile detection, cameras are rarely allowed. But we were able to observe a couple of Guardians as they kept...
Can we pause that for 1 sec? What's on his uniform? Maybe somebody in here can help me out. Maybe it's something important. I don't know. Fill me in. Let me know, Space Force. If I have any of you guys in here with us, drop it in the comments. What exactly was that little tag in his uniform? Let's keep going.
Watch over the radars.
What we do impacts almost everyone in their day-to-day lives, whether they're here, whether they're downrange, like it's life or death.
The mission is accomplished by the young men and women sitting at the operations floor. And we put a lot of trust and a lot of responsibility on these folks because we have trained them to be that good.
Right now in stage training, I'm still a little nervous because I am not fully confident in myself, but I know eventually later on in training, I will be able to do good on the ops floor.
Space Force is the president's boldest idea that he got from a Buzz Lightyear Happy Meal toy.
When the Space Force was first announced, it became the subject of late-night punchlines. There's even a Netflix series poking fun at the branch.
The president is creating a new branch, Space Force, which Mark will run.
What? The show provides a framework of notional Hollywood ideas of what the organization is about. A lot of this misperceptions is just a lot of unknowns and curiosity about what Space Force is.
When in reality, the Space Force was created out of the recognition that space is so important to our way of life that it deserves to be protected.
The Space Force also gets confused with its civilian counterpart, NASA.
So NASA, being our exploration as well as scientific branch of the government, they're looking out beyond the stars, trying to look out, get all that scientific data, as well as looking at manned missions. On the Space Force side, looking more inwardly, making sure that we're looking terrestrially to help our ground forces, air forces, as well as our allies and partners.
People constantly ask us, or if they see me in uniform, in a Space Force uniform, they're like, oh, have you been to space? Like, when's the last time you've been to space? There's actually very few operators that do go to space. Lucky for them. What we do is operate all of our assets within space.
That makes sense. That's probably the best way to put it. I definitely get it.
The Space Force is constantly growing and evolving. On August 4th, 2022, right before our visit to Buckley, the Space Force launched GEO-6, the 6th SBIRS geosynchronous Earth orbit satellite, into space.
Our success is not so much what we do to an adversary. Our success is more measured in terms of what an adversary does not do to us, because we stand guard.
This job is 24/7. It is something that is necessary, and our mission does not stop no matter what.
How copy? This is Vortex out.
Why she got to do that at the end? We already said it's not good. Whatever, let me leave that alone. I'm thoroughly impressed. I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely one of the people that looked at the Space Force as kind of a joke. I wanna say, I think most people did because of the way it was presented to us. They made it seem like it was this space fighting league that we're gonna go off to distant planets and start doing some Guardians of the Galaxy stuff. I don't watch movies, I don't know what that movie is. It just has Galaxy in it and it says Guardian, so I figured that it's applicable. Back in 2008 or 9, I can't remember the exact details, but we had General Conway come down and visit our base. He gave all the Marines an opportunity to ask questions directly to him. They put mics down in the auditorium. There was a guy that asked about space fighting. Everybody laughed. The entire auditorium erupted. Everybody's like, dude, that's so ridiculous, fighting in space, ah. The Commandant took it kind of seriously and he's like, we're actually working on something like that right now. Shocked everybody. So I don't know if that was a thought back then or if he was trying to play that part of, you know, a general, but it just goes to show that they were kind of thinking about it back then, at least I think. So I get it. It has a bad rap because of the way that media portrayed it, and the way that they presented it to us was quick, abrupt, and they didn't inform anybody what's going on. A lot of people use that cognitive heuristic and say, well, we know what NASA is, so Space Force must be like NASA. That's where I think everything kind of went wrong. Based off of what I'm seeing, I absolutely love this Space Force. I have a lot more respect for them, and I think that that one video, even though this is about a year old, it's one of the more recent ones I can find, really shine light into what their objective is, what their mission is, and what they're doing. I think the branch is awesome. I think their mission is amazing. They're innovative, and the ability to be able to detect missiles and proximities of where those impacts can occur is massive. I kind of wish we had something like that in the Marine Corps when I was in Afghanistan many years ago. I don't know if you guys remember this. They came out with something called the Blue Devil. It's this massive blimp. They didn't have any weapons on it, but it had a ton of equipment, millions and millions of dollars of equipment. They were gonna fly it up and it was gonna orbit over us as we're on the ground fighting, and it would be able to detect trajectory of missiles, mortars, and different things, and you can almost coordinate fire between our aviation assets, our ground assets. For an example, whenever we were doing any type of mortars or indirect fire, artillery, we would have to clear people in our airspace by about 40 miles to each side of what that mortar or that round was going to be. And this is just for safety, right? Because we all know things can happen. It can be off track, the aircraft can be out of place, whatever. So we had 40 miles on each side of this trajectory. They were saying that it was so accurate that they can slow that gap down or like make it a little bit smaller. I don't know, but either way, I'm learning more about the Space Force from you guys. I get asked about the Space Force a lot, and like we said, we've seen a lot of joke videos about it, and that's not what this is. This is to take a realistic perspective and a realistic look at what the Space Force is and what they do. I know how nerve-wracking it can be when you get on the radios and when you're trying to talk, especially when you know that lives are at stake. The scariest part of doing air traffic control and even being a pilot was getting on the radios and having to coordinate with other services or other agencies. It's nerve-wracking, right? You don't want to make a mistake, especially when you know that the mistake that you can make, it's a very real possibility that's going to cost people their lives. At the same time, you have to be quick in it. So your decision making and your critical thinking have to be so sharp that you can make split-second decisions that are accurate based based on whatever small information that you have at the time. That's how we did things in air traffic control, and that's how we did things as pilots. So I have a lot of respect for this, and I love that these guys that they were interviewing, or the men and women they're interviewing, kind of addressed that and said, look, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm not confident in my abilities, but I like the training and where we're going with this. The Air Force has always done things smart in terms of training in their treatment of their personnel. I made another great video that talked about the different branches. The Air Force is up there with being one of the most efficient and smartest branches there is. They get that stereotype for a reason. Their training is deliberate, and I get it. Maybe they're not the most craziest, badass, kicking down doors, doing whatever. They got special forces that do that, and those dudes are sick. That's not their mission. That's not what they're there for. That's not what they were designed for. What they are designed for, they do perfectly. Okay, nobody else can match the capabilities of the Air Force, and I think that just goes to show that they were successful in the Air Force. Now they're splitting off and going to the Space Force. I think they're going to be incredibly successful in this endeavor, especially as people start to understand their actual mission. I loved that, I believe he was a lieutenant at the end, that said people come up to him and ask him about space. And he's like, yeah, we don't really go to space. We have a couple people that do, but our equipment and our operations include space, or they are in space. I think that's a really good way to put it, because it puts more perspective on things. Like I said, people attach Space Force and anything space to NASA. The second you say space, they're like, oh, NASA, SpaceX? I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I'd like to make more like this, and maybe we can even look a little bit more into the Space Force on this channel if that's something that you guys are interested in. I got a video that's gonna pop up on the screen for you that you might enjoy. So until next time, see ya.